What are the objectives of al-iqtisad? If you are going to talk about macro or micro, if you're going to talk about the economics of a particular entity, whether the international sense, or you're going to talk about a nation state, or you are going to talk about even the human sense today, the definition of money, etc., like what you guys do when you study economics. What are the objectives of Islam? The objectives of Islam, if I may, I could put them in a few items. Let me start with that, and then the discussion would be clear. One is al-qist, or al-adl. The first maqsid, if we're going to talk about iqtisad, is actually justice. And justice is the basis of any theory that you might imagine of al-iqtisad. One is to protect the wealth. If you wish, حفظ المال. That's all right. You want to make sure that someone who has the wealth is protected. But حفظ المال is, of course, one of the 5 maqasid, but it's not the only maqsid. There is a whole bunch of other maqasid that are related to al-mal, not just حفظ المال. The first of which is infaq al-mal. One of the maqasid is to spend money versus to preserve money. That is from the first page of Surah Al-Baqarah, وَمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ, all the way to the end. Al-infaq, to spend money in the way of Allah, fi sabilillah, is actually one of the maqasid of the Sharia when it comes to al-iqtisad. My last visit here was maybe a year ago, 8 months ago, and I talked about al-awqaf. This whole lecture goes under that. Under al-infaq, the basic action in al-iqtisad al-Islami, from my perspective, my own fiqh of it, is actually to spend rather than to preserve. Yes, you could preserve your money and make sure that you don't fall in al-kanz. وَالَّذِينَ يَكْنِزُونَ الذَّهَبَ وَالْفِضَّةَ. That's going to be a problem if you're going to accumulate gold and silver and not spend it in the way of Allah. But if you pay its zakah and so on, the most important issue here is to spend, not just to preserve the money. And if we spend the money, am I not accumulating wealth? Is it haram? No, of course it's not haram to accumulate wealth. It's not haram to be rich in Islam, but it is haram not to spend from your wealth in the way of Allah. And therefore, the basic activity in the Islamic economics is al-awqaf, not at-tijara, not to trade. To trade is part of Islam, obviously, but to trade with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. هل أدلكم على تجارة تنجيكم من عذاب أليم? Do I tell you about the best tijara? Is to give in the way of Allah. And when you give in the way of Allah, this is not just feeding someone hungry or giving a charity for someone to buy clothes. This is the health system is going to be based on charity, not based on the trade in people's lives, as in the pharmaceutical industries and biomedical industries and so on. That much of what it does is very important, but much of what it does is very harmful to humanity. If you're going to spend in the way of Allah, therefore, this will be the educational institutes, the schools and the universities and so on. They are supposed to be awqaf. They are not supposed to be for profit. If you're going to spend in the way of Allah, this will be obviously for the masajid and hajj and umrah and so on, ibadat, that's important too. But if you spend in the way of Allah, there is a system we had in the Islamic civilization that is called awqaful aswaq. So to have a waqf for a market. The market is actually a waqf. And therefore, you could enter the profession of trade without credit because you are actually having a donation money that is going to give you some ability to trade even without credit. So if I may talk about the maqasid a little bit, the first one is al-infaq fi sabilillah, to spend in the way of Allah. And the intent of that is to use modern language, to empower the society versus the monopolizers of wealth. If I may say, this is tied to another maqsid that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about in the Quran when he talked about the public money. He said, كي لا يكون دولة بين الأغنياء منكم ما أفاء الله على رسوله. And then he said, كي لا يكون دولة بين الأغنياء منكم. So that money does not circulate only amongst the rich. K is أداة تعليل. This is a maqsid. When the Quran has a K or لكي or the lam التعليل, the scholars of tafsir say this is a maqsid. The circulation, they call it الرواج. Ibn Ashur talked about it in his book Maqasid الشريعة. But الرواج in Islam, circulation is not horizontally and is not up. Reagan says that money will trickle down. Money never trickles down. Money goes up all the time. And today you can see it very clearly. Since his time, money has been going up. And this is not the circulation that Islam means or intends to achieve. The circulation up here. No, the circulation should be vertical. From the rich to the poor, and from the poor to the rich. And that vertical circulation closes, if you wish, the gap, to use modern term, the gap between the rich and the poor should be there in Islam. This is how Allah created the universe, rich and poor, strong and weak, powerful and powerless. That's normal. What's not normal is for money not to circulate vertically from the rich to the poor and so on, so that the poor become poorer and the rich become richer. That is not Islamic. That goes against the maqsood of Islam. Islam is not intending for the economic reality to be like that. And the gap between the 1% club and then the 10% club, if you wish, and then the rest of humanity is now a major gap. And that is not capitalism or left thinking or any of that. I don't come from this perspective. That is a problem because it goes against the maqsood of the circulation of money. The circulation of money should be upwards and vertical.